Hello everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for watching this video. So we're going to take a pause on the four realms of Gaia and opening up to magic video series that I started at the beginning of this month. I know that I said that we would open more information about the different realms of Gaia, but for some reason I started receiving information that added to some previous information I brought forward, my video series titled Soul Origins and the Seven Rays of Light. I started bringing forward more information that added on to that information. And I think it's because we need to dive into this information first before we start opening up more information about the four realms of Gaia and the realms of Gaia and that whole magical experience. Because in the information I'm going to be presenting in maybe the next 2 or 3 videos, we are diving into this perception of macro and micro, this universe, our own internal universe, this toroidal energy field that we have of cycled energy. And we're going to just dive further into that so that we can understand a little bit more, because what came through for me really helped me to understand exactly where our souls come from and where our energy is cycled through. And it helped me to understand exactly how the universe runs through us as souls, as energy, as these physical incarnations, versus people just telling you that you are part of the universe, you are connected to everything. It's easy to say that, and it's easy to say, okay, yeah, I know I am, but do you really know how? And that's the information we're going to be bringing forward in today's video and in the next couple of videos. And then we'll dive back into the video series Four Realms of Gaia, opening up to magic and bringing forward more information about that. But I knew that there was a reason why probably in my last video, I mentioned that Abe stopped bringing forward information and said that I needed to put out the first 2 videos first in order to open up more. It's probably because I needed to open up this stuff first. But anyway, we'll get right into it. There's a lot to talk about. So before diving into this video, if you haven't yet watched any of my other Soul Origins, 7 Rays of Light videos, I have 3 parts to that series. I'll link them below, but if you haven't watched those videos first, go watch those videos first in order to understand this one a little bit better. But I'm going to go over it really quickly just to jog your memory. So I have everything here in an Illustrator file because it just makes it easier to kind of toggle back and forth between everything. So bear with this presentation style. So in the 7 Rays of Light video series, we spoke about how there was the source energy, which is eternal energy, the parent cell, and it divides into 2 cells, into the first ray and the second ray. The first ray being the spirit aspect, the second ray being the mind aspect, first ray being the divine feminine, second ray being the divine masculine energy. And then the first and second ray come back together to create the third ray. And this third ray is the body of God, the body of the cosmos, the reflection of Source itself, because Source split in 2, came back together into the third ray, and that is the reflection of Source itself. And now it's through the third ray that all the 7 rays of light exist. So the third ray acts as sort of like this prism where it holds the first and second ray because it's made up of the first and second ray and the third ray. At the same time, it reflects or refracts into the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th rays as well. And we went over that the 7 rays of light are non-physical energy. They are purely vibrational. They are expressions of God through vibration. So The higher the ray, so the first ray has the highest vibration, and the seventh ray has the lowest vibration, but they are basically expressions of God itself. And then we spoke about how the third ray further breaks down. What came through is that souls incarnate through the third ray aspect. And this is how you get human souls. And human souls are also the image of God because it's created from this third ray body of the cosmos, body of God. And then the 7 rays are also reflected or refracted into or through the human soul as well. So I started receiving more information to kind of break all of this down even more in terms of our own universe. Actually, first, let me talk about what I went over in terms of the 7 rays of light. So 7 rays of light, I had this picture in one of my past videos, how the first ray of light was about power, second ray of light was about wisdom, third ray of light was the love in soul, fourth ray of light is love in physical, fifth ray of light is truth, sixth ray of light is manifestation, seventh ray of light is recognition. And I break it down even further in these slides. If you remember these slides, I talked about the quality and energy of each ray, what it represents, the color associated with it, the keepers of the ray, and anything else that was significant. So again, be sure you watch these videos first, the first 3 videos of the 7 rays of light to really grasp what these 7 rays of light are. Basically, they are qualities of God, and I have here that on a soul aspect, the soul is constantly seeking expansion. So as a physical incarnation, we have the ability to offer expansion for the soul, and it's through our incarnation that our vibration and frequency sort of feeds back to the soul, and the soul is able to know itself through our incarnation. The soul is able to know itself much like how Source and God desires to know itself through its shards or further breaking down of itself, which is what we're going to go through. So here I have that in the soul connecting to the physical body, the soul can then work towards connecting to the vibration of Source. So as the soul connects to the physical body, like I said, the physical body and the soul will ping back and forth in terms of allowing that expansion in the physical and the non-physical soul aspect. As the soul raises in vibration, it can begin to know itself through these 7 rays of light, through recognition, manifestation, truth, love, wisdom, power. It makes its way onto this target board through these vibrations. So again, the 7th ray of light is the lowest vibrational ray of light. There is even lower vibrations that are not held within these 7 rays of light. So that's the point, is if you're a very, very low vibrational soul, you want to be able to raise your vibration to the point where you can even make it on to the 7 ray of light, this target board. And then from here, you can continue raising your vibration and making it to the 6th ray of light, the 5th ray of light, and so on and so forth. Usually the first, second, and maybe third rays of light are so high vibrational, what came through, that not a lot of souls make it to these points because a soul itself is born from the 3rd vibration. So moving into the 2nd and the 1st will be even beyond what it was, the vibration that it was born through. The 1st and the 2nd rays of light are energy frequencies very, very close to the energy frequency and signature of God. It is God broken down into the masculine and feminine, like what we went over here in terms of how the Source split into 2, 1st ray and 2nd ray, the masculine and the feminine. That's basically here in the middle, the first 2 rings of the target board. And in the middle is source. Okay, so let's get into what I want to talk about in today's video. In today's video, we are talking about the universal energy cycle of the physical incarnation. I'm going to go through this entire thing and explain these new revelations that came to me. So we're going to start with source and how source, we said, broke down into two. It split itself into two souls or two cells, the divine masculine and the divine feminine. This is the raw and the is, or the is and the raw energies. If you want to take a look back at the first and second ray here, we spoke about how the first ray has the divine feminine energy. It has the life path of is, and the second ray has that divine masculine and that more mind-centered energy with the life path of Ra. So let's go into the life paths. I should have gone through this first, but if you watch my past videos of the 7 rays of light, this will all make sense. So this whole 7 rays of light also ties into the is, Ra, and El mission paths that I went over in a past video as well. I'll put the link to that video below. And here I have described how the is mission path is more about that divine feminine. It's about the energy and life force of God. The Ra mission path is more about the mind, the knowledge, the divine masculine energy. And the El mission path is about the heart of God. But you can learn more about these mission paths in that video, and I'll briefly speak more about it in this video. So going back to this diagram, I have here how source splits into the divine feminine and the divine masculine, the is and the Ra, and it comes back together, and how we said that the divine feminine and divine masculine was the first and second ray, and it comes back together to create the third ray, which is the El. And what connected the dots for me is that the El, the third ray of light in this greater sort of micro scale, when we see body of God, body of the cosmos, the reflection of source itself, in terms of our own universe, what came through is that the body of God is this great central sun. The great central sun is the reflection of source itself. So when source split in two, it created, in terms of a manifestation, the great central sun, which is essentially the source within our own universe. So source itself created the universe from an outside perspective, is what came through in a past video. And within the universe that it created outside of itself, it holds its own source, which is within the universe, if that makes sense. So the great central sun is a reflection of the ultimate source. Now, so we have the first, second, and third rays here, and what connected the dots for me further is that every manifestation basically is broken down in the same way, because everything is a reflection of source. So we're going to take this third ray, which is the great central sun, and what we said was that all souls are born through the great central sun. Souls are not necessarily born through source itself. Source split itself to come back together to create a reflection of itself, a mirror of source, in where souls could be born in the universe, because source is outside of the universe. So souls needed to be born within the universe. So source made a reflection of itself to be the source held within the universe that could birth souls. So within this great central sun, I saw, like we spoke about here, this third ray of light, the great central sun, refracts all of the 7 rays of light. It refracts all 7 rays of light. So in that way, it was shown to me that the great central sun sort of splits into those 7 rays of light. It creates shards of itself in a way. So here I have the same birthing process. It splits into divine masculine, divine feminine. Those two come together to create one ray, and so on and so forth. So it does this 7 times. It splits 7 times into divine masculine and divine feminine to come back together to create another reflection of itself. And this reflection is in the ray. These rays are basically, like we said, it's expressions of source. So in order for source to know itself, it needs to continue breaking itself down further and further and further into the very tiniest of aspects. So it's going to break itself down into its 7 reflections or into its 7 expressions of source itself. And it does this through the great central sun, through the 3rd ray of light here. So again, we have here, we're going to continue this same process for all 7 rays. I said 7 rays are the shards of the great central sun. Each ray is a vibration or expression of source. Okay, so from these 7 rays, which were created or manifested, broken off from the great central sun, this is where we kind of get into the manifestation of our universe. We're going to take one of these rays, for example, although it goes the same for each ray. So I'm taking ray 2, for example. Ray 2, this is energy. So this energy breaks itself off through divine masculine, divine feminine, which are basically the birthing elements to create. And then the energy has to split into divine masculine and divine feminine to create something in order for that to come together and create something. So ray 2 breaks off, splits into divine masculine, divine feminine, brings those 2 energies back together to create the galactic sun. So under the great central sun is created the galactic sun. And from there, the galactic sun breaks off its energy into divine masculine and divine feminine again to further create the solar sun. That solar sun breaks off to create divine masculine, divine feminine energy for a birthing process to create the elements of the dimensions, which was told to me. The elements of dimensions basically is like the physical things in a dimension or a galaxy, the greater things like planets, in particular our planet Earth, Gaia. So Gaia then also, her energy, she breaks into divine feminine, divine masculine to come back together and create manifestations of the elements of the planets, meaning humans, animals, life on Earth. And as humans, this is where we are. We break our energy off from us into a divine masculine and divine feminine through our thought, through our mind, bringing it back together again to create further manifestations of humans. This includes the energy body and everything held within the energy body that we create. So we create our energy. And then it was told to me that that energy further breaks down into divine feminine, divine masculine, further births into the manifestations of our energy, which is the physical reality that we see around us, the things, even our health. And then the manifestations of our manifestations can further break down into continue, because it keeps going smaller and smaller and smaller. But we're going to stop here because we really want to talk about us as human beings and our energy and our manifestations that create our realities. So when we create our reality, we are literally breaking it down further and further and further as aspects of source. As you can see, it's just source broken down further and further and further. And what was shown to me was, for example, our realities, the things that we create, even us as human beings, the energy that is given off from anything, given off from our manifestations, given off from our health, given off from us as human beings, our energy field, that energy always feeds back to source. So here I have our manifestations. The energy from our manifestations feeds back to Gaia. And that energy then feeds back to the galaxy, meaning the solar sun and the galactic sun. And that energy feeds back to the universe, meaning the great central sun. And then that energy feeds back to source itself to start from the beginning again. And this is why I have these sort of dashed lines here for each one of these manifestations or creations, because at each point, the energy is always feeding back to source, while at the same time continuing to break down further and further and further in order for source to know itself. I have here that, it splits off of a single ray, but at the same time, what came to me was that each one of these manifestations are the reflections of source. So you can put each one here in where this L, great central sun, is, where each one of these manifestations offer or hold each of the 7 rays of light itself. So even here as human beings, we hold each of these 7 rays of light. The galactic sun holds each of the 7 rays of light. The solar sun holds each of the 7 rays of light. Even our manifestations, our physical reality, holds each of the 7 rays of light. The reason for that is to know itself. So I'm going to go through some quick information that came to me as I was creating this cycle in order for me to understand it a little bit better. And what came through is that energy recycles upon itself, like the toroidal energy field. The 7 rays of light are within each that is created in order for it to know itself. The 7 rays of light are like an internal blueprint for the soul to ultimately find its way back to source. For open energy of the universe to work, souls must open into the manifestations and creations, meaning that in order for the universe to work, the energy of the universe to work, souls have to open up into each of these manifestations, the galactic sun, the solar sun, the elements, the planets, humans, animals, the manifestations of humans, etc., in order for this energy to continue cycling. What came through is that souls are born from the great central sun through a specific ray and placed into destined manifestations. So, again, souls are born through one of the rays from the great central sun into here, for example, humans. They go on to further explain why the great central sun splits into these different rays and why souls kind of move through a single ray to be incarnated into an experience through that one single ray. They said that if, for example, a soul is opened into the 3rd ray as a human soul on a planet, the soul will immediately open energy of the 3rd ray onto the planet. The soul will have all 7 rays in order for it to know itself, but will open the 3rd ray as its sole mission. So to explain better. If a soul opens up into the second ray as a human on planet Earth, it immediately opens the energy of the second ray because it was born through the second ray, but at the same time, because it's also a reflection of a reflection of a reflection, etc., of source, it also holds all 7 rays of light. Everything always holds all 7 rays of light in order for it to know itself. So the soul born through the second ray of light as a human will open the energy of the second ray of light as its greater mission in its incarnation, but it still holds all 7 rays of light. It's also coming to me that because of the high vibration of, like we spoke about here, the high vibration of the first, second, and third rays of light, not many souls are born through these first 3 rays. Most souls are born through the 7th, 6th, 5th, and 4th rays of light, especially onto lower vibrational planets, because the vibration is already low, and souls, if they've gone through many incarnations, their soul vibrations are usually low. So you can't take a low vibrational soul and open them up into a high vibrational mission path. They have to align vibrationally to where they're at on a soul level as well as an incarnation level. The next thing that came through was that the Is, Ra, and El mission paths are energy paths open within each ray, for example, the 3rd ray, and they offer a more specific mission within the 3rd ray greater mission. So if a soul is born through this 2nd ray, through the great central sun, as a human on planet Gaia, they have this overarching mission, which is they open the energy of the 2nd ray onto the planet. But at the same time, they still have the Is, Ra, and El mission paths because they're born out of divine feminine, divine masculine, and this El 3rd ray of light, which essentially is this energy space that they open up into, so to speak. So that kind of goes into the Is, Ra, and El mission paths as more specific mission paths within the ray that they were born through. And then they sort of take us onto the target board that we went through. They said us making our way onto the target board of the 7 rays of light is within each of us as a way for the soul to know itself as energy that originates from the great central sun and ultimately source. The reason for us to make it onto this target board and understand and know the 7 rays of light is for us to make our way through this vibration, open up into higher vibration, and become or get closer and closer to source as a soul's vibration. This opens our expansion into fully knowing us as a soul, as our own individual souls, and as we come to know ourselves as our soul, source on a greater aspect understands itself a little bit more as well. Okay, and then they take us into this. So they connected me to this graphic and they broke it down further into this type of another target board where source is here on the outside because everything in the universe is sort of like a manifestation within source, within the greater source. So we have source here on the outside. We have the great central sun that it opens up to create. The great central sun opens up to create the galactic sun within it. The galactic sun opens up to create the solar sun. Solar sun creates the elements of the dimensions. That creates the manifestations such as humans and animals on the planets, which are the elements of dimensions, and then further into human manifestations, further and further and further inward. And this is just kind of like another way to see or to view this larger universal energy cycle, this graphic, how everything is just broken down over like further and further and further, and at the same time it feeds back to source. So here we have how source feeds its energy inward always. It's continuously going inward, while at the same time, everything that it feeds itself into opens up and feeds its energy back to source in order for source to know itself. So here we have this larger aspect, and then we move into, if you want to see, for example, if we just take the great central sun, source in the creation of the great central sun and in the great central sun's experience is right here. And source will feed its energy to the great central sun. At the same time, it's going to continue to feed its energy into everything that the great central sun creates into infinity. That energy, whatever is created or whatever source puts its energy into, is going to be fed back into source itself. The great central sun feeds its energy back to source here, while everything that the great central sun creates within it feeds its energy back into the great central sun, if that makes sense, to continue this loop, this continuous and continual loop of energy, cycle of energy. And then we'll take the next, we'll look at the galactic sun. So in the galactic sun's experience, it's right there. So source is going to continue feeding its energy to the galactic sun so that it can continue creating inward its own manifestations, and then all of its manifestations will continue feeding their energy back to the galactic sun, and the galactic sun will continue feeding its energy back to source into this great and grander loop. The solar sun now has its own experience. It was created from the galactic sun. So energy from source will continue moving through to the solar sun, as well as everything that the solar sun creates within it. That energy feeds back to the solar sun, and the solar sun will continue feeding its energy back to source. The elements of the dimensions, meaning the planets, Gaia herself, has an experience, and that experience source will continue feeding its energy through the great central sun, galactic sun, solar sun, to Gaia herself, and that will continue to allow Gaia to feed, or will feed source energy to everything that Gaia creates within her, within the planets. Everything will then feed its energy back to Gaia, and from there Gaia will continue feeding back to source. And now here we are as humans. As humans, we have an experience. This experience was birthed from the planets, from the elements of the dimensions, through the divine masculine and the divine feminine energy. Source feeds source energy through all of these elements to us here as humans. This allows us to continue our energy cycle and create everything within us. Everything within us, our manifestations, our energy feeds back to us, where we feed it back to everything that comes before us. We feed it back to Gaia, we feed it back to the solar sun, back to the galactic sun, back to source ultimately. Same thing goes with our manifestations. So, in this case, this is like our energy field. So our energy field has this experience, and we receive energy from source through all of these elements so that it can continue feeding inward. All of everything inward feeds back to our energy field, feeds back to our bodies, feeds back to Gaia, feeds back to the solar sun, all the way back up to source. And this goes on and on and on. It's just like a continuous toroidal field energy cycle between all the elements that are created, all of the manifestations, all of the fractals, or more so it's just a continual breakdown of source from greater into smaller, into where we are. And this allows us to understand how basically from where we are, our energy is being fed back to source in this continuous and continual cycle of energy feeding back to Gaia, back to the galaxy, back to the universe, back to source, while being fed from all of these elements at the same time. So our energy is coming through the great central sun, the galactic sun, solar sun, Gaia. It's a continual spiral, a continual loop of energy, a cycle of energy over and over and over again. And here we have how each layer or manifestation or creation is opened through the birthing process, a split into divine feminine and divine masculine energy that then comes back together to create the further manifestation or reflection of source, a micro aspect to the greater source. And that was basically talking about this, how everything is birthed as a micro of this macro source. It just keeps moving more and more inward, but it's birthed through the birthing process, which is the split of the divine feminine, divine masculine coming back together. And then we have within each layer, which within each of those circles on the target board, the energy of each layer feeds back to source, while at the same time it opens into further micro manifestations. That's exactly what we were saying, is as for example, each layer feeds back to source, while at the same time moving into its own manifestations and creations within itself. And then we have all the many layers or aspects as we go further and further inward into that target board, are ways that break off from source, ways that source splits in order to fully know itself. So we are simply just a micro of a micro of a micro of source, a continual split after split after split, like for source to continue breaking it down into the very smallest aspects in order for all of that information to be fed back to source, for it to understand itself, while at the same time everything within us is feeding back to us for us to understand ourselves in this greater cycle of this physical incarnation, of all physical incarnations. So as we, a physical incarnation here in our human experience, we are creating our own universal energy cycle here, feeding to source, receiving energy from source, our manifestations feeding to us, and so on and so forth. All of these other incarnations and experiences, such as the galactic sun, the solar sun, Gaia, animals, they're all having their own experience. Other human beings are having their own experience, creating within their own universal energy cycle, energies, the system of energy running through them and their own energy. So if you think about it, there's just so much of this, at least in our 3D physical experience, there are so many of these universes because we're each creating essentially our own, this universal energy cycle within ourselves. This goes back to the idea of our vibration. So again, the vibration that we give off, the vibration that we hold, the frequency that we hold, it's going to be recycled and cycled through this entire universal energy cycle of our own physical incarnation. This is why if you give off a lower vibration and frequency, it's going to be returned to you and continue in your manifestations that go within you in your micro, as well as the macro to you. It's going to be recycled over and over again until you switch that energy and begin to cycle higher vibrational energy. So you have to think about that when you are giving off your vibration now, because you're understanding exactly how this cycle works. The energy that you give off is the energy that you receive back. And this energy cycles through your own personal universe of your own personal galactic sun, solar sun, great central sun, Gaia. It's all being fed back into your cycled universe. And we're going to talk more about how there can be so many different universes, essentially, since we're each of our individual experiences are creating our own mini universes within this greater universe. We're going to talk more about that and break down more questions that I had regarding this entire cycle and process in the next video, or in the next two or three videos. And that's it that I want to talk about in this video. I'm going to give you a moment to sit on this information and integrate it and activate the knowledge within yourself. And I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. In oneness we are Abe. Oneness and love be with you.